1 year after the Battle of Entertainment, as humans insisted on calling it, the Sol system had become the galaxy's premier destination for combat tourism. The former Khazari invasion fleet now served as floating arenas, their fearsome weapon arrays converted into spectacular light shows for martial arts tournaments. Admiral Cathax, now serving as commissioner of the Intergalactic Combat Sports Federation, stood beside Admiral Chen in the observation deck of Earth's newest space station, the Thunderdome. Humanity had insisted on the name, despite numerous alternatives proposed by the planning committee. "You realize," Cathax mused, watching a Khazari break-dancing crew challenge a human team to a zero-gravity dance battle, that none of this was actually necessary for our biological combat need. Chen sipped his space Cola Zero. "Oh. The bureaucracy, the gaming centers, the merchandising. Our species simply needed regular combat. We could have maintained our traditional warfare. But would it have been this profitable?" Chen gestured to the stadium below, where vendors were doing brisk business in combination human-Khazari fusion street food. "Try the scales and fries, by the way. They're amazing." The station's main arena was hosting the semifinals of the Mixed Species Combat Championship. A Khazari martial artist was facing off against a human sumo wrestler, while the audience, a mix of both species, cheered them on with equal enthusiasm. Betting pools were running hot, merchandising stands were packed, and social media was ablaze with commentary. "We're receiving applications from 17 other warrior races," Cathax noted, reviewing his tablet. "They all want to join the league. The Vraksexi Death Commandos are particularly interested in the synchronized swimming combat division. See, this is what humans do best. We take something that works and make it work better, usually by adding snack foods and commentary teams." The evidence was everywhere. Khazari warships, once symbols of terror, now hosted gaming tournaments with prize pools that could buy small planets. Their fearsome battle ceremonies had evolved into pre-match entertainment shows that made the Super Bowl look understated. Even their traditional war cries had been remixed into chart-topping dance tracks. "The latest figures are in," Cathax continued. "Tourism revenue has tripled. The Learn to Fight Like a Khazari fitness programs are selling out across 3 galaxies. And the reality show Warriors in Training just got picked up for 6 more seasons." Below them, the match ended with both competitors bowing respectfully before engaging in a complicated handshake routine that had become viral across social media. The crowd went wild. "But the most surprising thing," Cathax said softly, "is that our young warriors are developing fighting styles we never imagined. They're combining human techniques with our traditional forms. They're innovating, creating." Chen nodded. "That's what happens when you stop fighting just to fight, and start fighting for the joy of it. Speaking of which, our chess rematch is scheduled for tomorrow. I've been practicing. As have I, though I still don't understand why capturing small carved pieces satisfies my combat need. Because, my scaly friend, humans figured out long ago that combat isn't just about the fight. It's about the challenge, the skill, the artistry." Chen paused. "Also the merchandising. Never forget the merchandising." As if to emphasize his point, a group of young Khazari passed by wearing Earth Defense Force jerseys and human sports team caps, arguing passionately about proper submission hold techniques. The station's main screen displayed upcoming events: zero-gravity wrestling, tactical esports tournaments, synchronized space fighter demonstrations, and something called Extreme Interspecies Mini-Golf that had somehow become a surprise hit. "You know what the best part is?" Chen said, watching a human coach teaching a Khazari team the finer points of basketball. "We didn't just find a way to satisfy your combat need. We found a way to make it bring people together." Cathax nodded, his scales gleaming under the arena lights. "Indeed. Though I still have one question. Oh, what exactly is this Fantasy League thing? And why am I getting constant requests to join one?" Chen's laughter echoed through the observation deck. The galaxy's greatest warrior race still had so much to learn about the true art of competitive combat, human style. The Khazari warships emerged from hyperspace like obsidian daggers piercing the void. Pluto's orbit provided them the perfect vantage point to survey their latest hunting ground, the Sol system, home to a species that had barely taken its first steps into space. Admiral Cathax stood on the bridge of the Dominion's flagship, his scaled hide reflecting the dim purple lighting that bathed the command center. His secondary heart began pumping faster at the prospect of new combat, even if these humans seemed painfully primitive. The massive view screen showed their pitiful orbital stations, antiquated satellites, and minimal defensive capabilities. "Send the standard greeting," Cathax commanded, his voice resonating with the traditional bloodlust of his species. "Let us see if they possess even a fragment of worthiness." The message burst forth across all frequencies, transmitted in over 300 galactic languages. "We are the Khazari Dominion. We seek combat. Your species will provide it, or be enslaved. You have one planetary rotation to respond." The bridge crew settled in for the usual wait. Most species took the full allowed time to either surrender or mount a futile defense. Some begged for mercy, others tried to negotiate. The Khazari had seen it all across 12 galaxies. 17 minutes later, their receivers crackled to life. "That's impossible," muttered the communications officer. "They couldn't have decoded our languages this quickly." But the response came through clear as starlight. A video transmission, broadcast on the exact same frequencies the Khazari had used. The bridge crew gathered around their screens, expecting to see panicked alien faces or trembling diplomats. Instead, they saw a single human in what appeared to be a military uniform. The human's face bore what the Khazari's cultural database identified as a grin, though none of them had seen one quite so predatory before. The human cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing through the bridge's audio systems. "Took you long enough to show up," the human said, speaking perfect High Khazari. "We've been watching you skulk around the Oort cloud for weeks. Name's Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. About that combat you're looking for." He cracked his neck, the casual gesture somehow more threatening than any formal challenge the Khazari had ever received. "Cash these hands." Cathax's translator glitched on the idiom, but the meaning was clear enough. "You dare to mock the Dominion." He transmitted back, "Your species has barely achieved lunar travel. Your weapons are primitive. Your defenses are negligible." Admiral Chen's grin widened. "Funny thing about humans, we're really good at hiding stuff we don't want found. Check your inbox. Sending coordinates for our first engagement. Unless, of course, you're having second thoughts." The bridge erupted in snarls of rage. Cathax raised a clawed hand for silence. "You understand this challenge will result in the death or enslavement of your species." "Maybe," Chen replied. "Or maybe we'll finally give you the fight you've been looking for. 24 hours, those coordinates. Bring your A-game." The transmission cut off. Cathax studied the coordinates, a point in high Earth orbit, well within range of their weapons, but also exposed to whatever defenses the humans might have hidden. The positioning suggested either tactical brilliance or complete military incompetence. "Orders, Admiral," his second-in-command asked. Cathax felt both his hearts racing now. Something about this didn't feel right. No species had ever responded with such eagerness, yet their scans showed nothing but a primitive civilization, barely able to reach their own satellite. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded, "but approach with caution. These humans," he called up the video again, studying Chen's predatory smile. "They're either incredible warriors or incredible fools. Either way, they've accepted our challenge. Honor demands we meet them." As the Khazari fleet began its slow advance toward Earth, none of them noticed the seemingly derelict satellites adjusting their positions by millimeters, nor the subtle changes in Earth's civilian communication traffic. They were about to learn why challenging humanity to a fight was generally considered a poor tactical decision. The Khazari fleet arrived at the designated coordinates with weapons primed and shields at maximum power. What they found instead of an enemy armada was a single space station, roughly cylindrical, with Department of Interstellar Combat Regulations emblazoned across its hull in 15 languages. Admiral Kethax's scales bristled with irritation as a cheerful human voice hailed their ship. "Welcome to the DICR. Please dock at Bay 7 for proper combat registration and orientation." "This is an insult," growled his second-in-command. "They mock us with bureaucracy." Kethax studied the station. No weapons signatures. Minimal shielding. A crew of what appeared to be office workers. "It's a trap," he declared. "It must be." "Oh, it's no trap," the human voice chimed in, apparently having heard them. "We just need you to fill out some forms before we can proceed with any official combat operations. Standard procedure, you understand." 20 minutes later, Kethax found himself seated in what the humans called a waiting room, holding a tablet filled with documents. His honor guard stood awkwardly around him, their massive battle armor looking absurdly out of place among the potted plants and coffee machines. A human in a crisp business suit approached, carrying even more tablets. "Now then," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Before we can process your combat request, we'll need you to complete Form XJ-279, Environmental Impact Assessment for Planetary Bombardment. Also, you'll need to review our workplace safety regulations, sign off on the Geneva Convention protocols, and provide proof of insurance." Insurance. Kethax's translator struggled with the concept. "Oh yes, can't have unauthorized destruction of property without proper coverage. Also, do you have any allergies? Our combat zones are entirely peanut-free." The Admiral's claws dug into his armrest. "We are the Khazari Dominion. We have conquered 12 galaxies. We do not need insurance." The human simply made a note on her tablet. "I'll put you down for the high-risk category then. Now about scheduling. We have an opening for a minor skirmish next Tuesday, or if you prefer something more substantial, we could book you for a major engagement next month, though you'll need to complete Form KL-331. Request for Strategic Battle Planning, in triplicate." As Kethax struggled through endless documents, his fleet hung in space, growing increasingly restless. Hours turned into days. Every completed form somehow spawned 3 more. They learned about Earth's Combat Ethics Committee, their standards for acceptable collateral damage, and something called OSHA regulations. Meanwhile, in a secure facility deep beneath Geneva, Admiral Chen watched the feed from the station with barely contained amusement. Around him, Earth's best military analysts pored over every second of footage, every energy reading from the Khazari ships. "Look at their shield modulators," one analyst pointed out. "They're cycling power to maintain their battle-ready status. 7 minutes between each cycle. Their hull composition changes under different wavelengths," another noted. "And there's a distinct resonance pattern when their communications array activates." Chen nodded, watching Kethax attempt to understand Earth's liability waiver forms. "How long before we have a complete technical analysis?" "Another 48 hours should do it. These bureaucratic delays are giving us everything we need." Back on the station, Kethax finally snapped. He slammed his tablet down, cracking its screen. "Enough. We demand combat, not paperwork." The office worker didn't even flinch. "I understand, sir, but without proper documentation, we can only offer you our basic combat package. No planet-wide destruction, no orbital bombardment, and absolutely no disintegration rays before 3 p.m. local time." As Kethax stormed back to his ship, trailing forms and regulations behind him, he failed to notice how the station's seemingly decorative lighting had mapped his armor's weak points, or how each conversation had been carefully crafted to test his species' psychological responses. The humans were indeed preparing for combat, just not in any way the Khazari would have recognized. After 3 weeks of bureaucratic torture, the Khazari finally received combat clearance. Admiral Cathax's flagship led the ceremonial approach to Earth's orbit, his fleet arranging themselves in the traditional formation of imminent victory, a display that had heralded the fall of 1,000 worlds. At last, Cathax breathed, his scales having returned to their normal hue after the paperwork ordeal. Prepare the victory broadcast. Let all witness the might of the Dominion. The humans had requested this formation specifically, citing Form TR 771. Requirements for traditional combat ceremonies. Fax had been too relieved to finally engage in real combat to question why the humans were so insistent on proper fleet positioning. Admiral Chen watched from his command center as the Khazari ships moved into perfect alignment. "Magnificent," he murmured. "They really do follow their battle protocols to the letter." He lifted his coffee mug, emblazoned with World's OKest Admiral, and pressed a small button on its handle. Across Earth's orbit, thousands of satellites simultaneously dropped their civilian broadcasting masks. Communication arrays transformed into weapon platforms. Weather monitoring systems revealed themselves as targeting arrays. Even the orbital billboard advertising, Space Cola, turned out to be a massive energy cannon in disguise. Cathax was dictating the terms of surrender when his tactical officer screamed, "Admiral, energy signatures everywhere. The humans' communication network, it's all weapons." "Impossible," Cathax started to say, but the word died in his throat as he watched a satellite labeled Puppy Webcam Network unfold into a precision railgun platform. Chen's voice came through clear and crisp. "Remember how I said humans are good at hiding things? Form TR 771 actually stands for Tactical Repositioning. 771 kill zones. Thanks for lining up so nicely." The first volley caught the Khazari completely off guard. Their ships, arranged in ceremonial formation, had their shields optimized for display rather than defense. 30 vessels were crippled in the opening seconds. But the paperwork. Cathax sputtered as his flagship rocked with impacts. "The regulations, the committees. Oh, those were real," Chen replied cheerfully. "We take our bureaucracy very seriously. But they served another purpose. Every form you filled out, every meeting you attended, every frustrated energy spike from your ships, it all helped us map your capabilities. Did you really think we spent 3 weeks just shuffling papers?" The Khazari fleet scrambled to break formation, but the humans had positioned their weapons perfectly. Every evasive route led straight into another kill zone. Even their emergency protocols had been anticipated, their escape vectors pre-targeted. "The coffee machines in the waiting room," Chen continued. "Specialized scanners, those ridiculous motivational posters, advanced sensor arrays. Even the potted plants were analyzing your biological responses. While you were complaining about our paperwork, we were learning everything about you." A second volley tore through the Khazari's reformed battle lines. Fax watched in horror as Earth's orbital defense grid revealed its true nature. Civilian stations transformed into fortress platforms. Maintenance drones became swarms of interceptors. Even the space debris they'd dismissed as primitive pollution turned out to be carefully positioned kinetic weapons. "Impossible," Cathax whispered again, watching his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by what they'd dismissed as a primitive civilization. "Your species, you're supposed to be barely space-capable." "Yeah, about that." Chen's grin was audible in his voice. "We've learned that looking harmless is surprisingly useful. Makes it much more fun when we show our real capabilities. By the way, remember that liability waiver you signed. You might want to review Section 47, Paragraph 9. No refunds for military losses incurred during ceremonial ambushes." As his flagship systems blared with warnings, Cathax realized that humanity hadn't just outfought them. They'd been outplayed from the very first moment. The greatest military force in 12 galaxies had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by bureaucracy, creativity, and humanity's talent for hiding teeth behind smiles. The Khazari High Command received the battle footage with stunned silence. On their holoscreens, they watched a human mining vessel, It all still bearing corporate logos and safety warnings, accelerate directly into one of their destroyer's shield arrays. The impact shouldn't have done any damage. Yet somehow, the humans had calculated the exact resonance frequency of their shields through all that bureaucratic probing. "They're insane," whispered first speaker Tilax, his scales pale. The mining ship's crew survived by ejecting in maintenance pods, which they then used as kinetic ammunition against our response fighters. "That's not the worst part," second speaker Virax added, hewing up another recording. "Watch their civilian channels." The footage switched to what appeared to be an entertainment broadcast. Two humans sat behind a desk, enthusiastically discussing the battle as if it were a sporting event. And here we see the UES legitimate salvage operation, formerly a deep space mining vessel, performing what commentators are calling the yeet and delete maneuver, one announcer said cheerfully. "Really innovative use of industrial equipment there, Bob." "Absolutely, Jim. Notice how they use the mineral scanner's electromagnetic pulse to disrupt the Khazari shield harmonics just before impact. That's the kind of creative thinking that wins space battles, folks." The broadcast continued, complete with slow-motion replays, technical analysis, and betting odds for the next engagement. They even had corporate sponsors. This battle segment brought to you by Space Cola. When you need that extra boost to ram an alien battleship. In his command ship, Admiral Kthax watched his fleet's carefully planned containment strategy fall apart in ways no military training could have prepared them for. Earth's orbital debris field, which they'd dismissed as simple pollution, turned out to be an intricately planned defensive web. Every piece of space junk had been catalogued, tracked, and prepared as potential ammunition. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are using their garbage collection vessels to redirect debris streams into our patrol routes. They're weaponizing their trash." "Of course they are," Kthax muttered, watching a derelict satellite fragment pierce one of his cruiser's armor plates. "Because that's what humans do. They turn everything into a weapon." The situation grew more bizarre by the hour. Human cargo ships performed complex ballet-like maneuvers that just happened to disrupt Khazari targeting systems. Civilian emergency broadcasts contained coded tactical information hidden in pop music. Even their retreat routes were blocked by what appeared to be an impromptu space construction project, complete with warning signs and union-mandated break times. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen hosted daily strategy briefings that looked more like game show tapings. Officers presented battle plans through interpretive dance. Critical military decisions were made via audience participation. The Khazari intelligence analysts trying to decrypt these sessions nearly had nervous breakdowns. "The humans," one analyst reported, "appear to have turned our invasion into some form of mass entertainment. They're selling merchandise. There are action figures of their ship captains. Someone wrote a theme song." Thax watched in horror as human ships began displaying kill counts like sports statistics. They had leagues, rankings, and something called fantasy fleet leagues, where civilians could win prizes for predicting battle outcomes. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. They want to know if we'd be interested in licensing opportunities. Apparently, you've developed quite a fan following. They're offering merchandising rights and something called exclusive interview opportunities." Kthax stared at the proposal, which included concept art for plush toys of his flagship and action figures of his command staff. The humans had even included projected revenue shares and marketing strategies. "They're not just fighting us," he realized. "They're not even just beating us. They're turning our sacred combat traditions into entertainment and profiting from it." The true horror of humanity's approach to warfare was finally becoming clear. They didn't just fight. They turned fighting into fun. And somehow, that made them more terrifying than any traditional warrior race could ever be. The first sign that something was wrong came when Khazari warriors started getting sick. It began with tremors, progressed to fever, and ended with uncontrollable aggression. After 3 weeks of bureaucratic delays and bizarre human combat tactics, their biological need for battle was reaching critical levels. Admiral Chen noticed the pattern during a routine review of captured Khazari biomedical data. "These readings can't be right," he muttered, studying the neural patterns. "Get me a direct line to their medical bay." The captured Khazari doctor's scales were pale, his movements jerky with barely contained aggression. "You don't understand," he hissed through the translator. "We require combat. Not your strange entertainment versions, not your bureaucratic mockeries. Real combat. Without it, we deteriorate." Chen leaned forward, fascination replacing concern. "You're telling me your species literally needs to fight, like humans need water?" "Yes, our evolution, our biology, our very genetic code demands it. The longest any Khazari has survived without combat is 63 days. After that, the doctor's claws scraped against his examination table. Total psychological breakdown. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not his usual predatory grin, but something almost gentle. "Why didn't you just say so? We got these things called boxing rings." The doctor's translator glitched. "Boxing rings. Oh, buddy," Chen chuckled. "Let me introduce you to the concept of recreational violence." Within hours, Earth's finest experts in combat sports have been assembled. They set up a demonstration in one of the captured Khazari ship's cargo bays. The aliens watched in confusion as 2 humans entered a roped-off square, wearing padded gloves. "This makes no sense," Kfax commented from his containment cell. "They wear protection. They fight within boundaries. There are rules." Then the match began. The Khazari watched in growing fascination as the 2 humans engaged in what could only be described as ritualized combat. There was skill, there was violence, but there was also control, structure, art. "Notice how neither combatant is trying to kill the other," Chen explained. "The goal is victory, not destruction. We've got dozens of sports like this: boxing, wrestling, MMA, fencing." The doctor's instruments showed something remarkable. The Khazari observer's combat need was decreasing just from watching the match. When volunteers were called to try it themselves, the effect was even more pronounced. "It's not just the physical combat," the doctor reported, amazement in his voice. "The structure, the skill requirement, the ceremonial aspects, they all satisfy our biological imperatives. This is unprecedented." Earth's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Combat dojos sprang up in every detention center. Khazari warriors found themselves enrolled in martial arts classes. Someone even started a zero-gravity wrestling league. The most surprising discovery came when a young Khazari warrior tried something called video games. "You mean," he asked, claws flying over the controller, "humans created artificial combat simulations for entertainment?" "Kid," his human instructor laughed, "you haven't even seen our esports tournaments yet." The effect on Khazari society was profound. For the first time in their history, they discovered ways to satisfy their combat need without actual warfare. Some traditionalists grumbled, but it was hard to argue with the medical readings. Boxing matches and competitive gaming weren't just alternatives to combat. For many, they were better. "Your species," Kfax said during one of his now regular chess matches with Chen, "truly terrifies me. You took our most sacred biological imperative and turned it into hobby clubs." Chen captured Kfax's bishop with a flourish. "That's humanity for you. We'll turn anything into a sport. Did you know we have competitive tea brewing, extreme ironing, professional tag? Professional tag. Oh man, wait until you see parkour. I've got some videos that'll blow your mind." As Kfax felt his combat need ebb after another satisfying chess match, he realized the humans hadn't just defeated the Khazari Dominion. They'd offered them something far more valuable, a way to live without constant war, while still honoring their warrior nature. They'd given them peace through punching, and somehow it worked perfectly. The first Khazari mixed martial arts tournament was broadcast live across 3 galaxies. In the converted cargo bay of a former warship, warriors who once decimated star systems now competed under unified rules, with weight classes and referees. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, the announcer's voice boomed, "Welcome to the inaugural Interstellar Combat Championship. Tonight's main event. The Stellar Serpent Shkax versus Hurricane Henderson." The Khazari fighter had adapted human boxing wraps to accommodate his claws. His opponent, a compact human woman from Brisbane, bounced on her toes as she sized up her 8-foot-tall adversary. The betting odds were astronomical. In his VIP seat, Admiral Cathax watched with a mixture of fascination and concern. "They're both wearing protective equipment. In my day." "In your day," Chen interrupted, munching on popcorn, "you'd both be dead. This way, they can fight again next week. Better ratings." The match was a revelation. Skax's natural armor and strength met Henderson's speed and technical skill. Neither species had the clear advantage. When Henderson won by submission in the 3rd round, the Khazari audience erupted not in rage, but in appreciative roars. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. Deep in the Khazari fleet's ceremonial chamber, Elder Vikath addressed his fellow traditionalists. "They mock our sacred combat traditions with these games. Our warriors wear padding like frightened hatchlings. They celebrate defeat." The resistance was growing. Old Guard warriors watched in horror as young Khazari embraced human combat sports with increasing enthusiasm. Gaming centers opened in former military installations. Someone introduced the concept of laser tag, and suddenly training facilities were filled with warriors playing elaborate games of tactical combat simulation. "It's heresy," Vikath hissed, watching a group of younglings celebrating after a particularly intense capture the flag match. "They're even adopting human victory celebrations. One of them did something called a dab yesterday." But the medical data was undeniable. The new activities weren't just satisfying the Khazari's combat need, they were doing it more efficiently than actual warfare. Warriors reported better sleep, improved focus, and most surprisingly, a deeper appreciation for combat itself. "It's the technique," a young warrior named Kurix explained during his streaming session. He had become something of a celebrity, broadcasting his gaming matches to millions. In real war, it's all about overwhelming force. But in these human sports, every movement matters. It's pure, somehow. The cultural shift accelerated. Khazari warships were retrofitted with training dojos and gaming centers. Traditional war ceremonies incorporated elements of human sporting events. One particularly popular fighter even launched his own energy drink brand. Admiral Chen watched it all with barely concealed amusement. "You know what the best part is?" he asked Thax during their weekly chess match. "We didn't have to change your culture. We just showed you how to channel it differently." Thax moved his knight, threatening Chen's queen. "Some would say you've corrupted us with your human entertainment. Have we? Or have we given you something you didn't even know you needed? Look at your younger warriors. They're still fighters, still warriors, but now they've got something else too. Joy." It was true. The younger generation of Khazari approached combat sports with an enthusiasm that traditional warfare had never inspired. They studied techniques, developed strategies, formed teams and rivalries. They trash-talked in multiple languages and created elaborate entrance music for their matches. But the old guard wasn't going quietly. As Vikath's followers grew more isolated, their rhetoric became more extreme. They watched in mounting horror as their proud warrior race embraced everything from capoeira to competitive gaming. "This cannot stand," Vikath declared to his supporters. "If these humans think they can turn our sacred combat traditions into their circus shows, they will learn the true meaning of war." The stage was set for a final confrontation, not between species, but between the old way of war and humanity's gift of recreational violence. Vikath's rebellion began during the Intergalactic Gaming Championship Finals. as millions watched a crucial match between Earth's top StarCraft player and a promising young Khazari strategist. The traditionalists struck. Their warships, hidden in deep space, emerged with weapons blazing. "Delete those streaming channels," Vikath commanded as his fleet approached Earth. "No more games. No more sports. Today, we restore true combat to the Khazari people." In his command center, Admiral Chen sipped his coffee, watching the approaching fleet with an almost bored expression. "You know," he said to his staff, "they really should have read the fine print on their combat permits." "Sir." Section 89C. In the event of unauthorized military action, all preceding reconnaissance data becomes property of Earth Defense Force. They spent months watching us play games. Never occurred to them we were playing the longest game of all. The asteroid belt, humanity's first line of defense, suddenly came alive. What looked like random debris was actually an intricately choreographed defensive network. Each piece had been carefully positioned during months of seemingly innocent space traffic. Did they really think we spent all this time just teaching their people to play games? Chen grinned. Every tournament was a tactical analysis. Every sporting event mapped their capabilities. Even their gaming sessions showed us how they think, how they strategize. Vikath's first wave hit the asteroid field at full speed. They expected to punch through easily. Instead, they found themselves caught in what one human commander gleefully called the galaxy's biggest pinball machine. "Remember those traffic control satellites we installed?" Chen's grin widened. "Turns out they're pretty good at redirecting asteroids." Who knew? But the old guard wasn't going down easily. Vikath's ships pushed through, even as the asteroid defense network extracted a heavy toll. They approached Earth's orbit, ready for their final victory, and found something unprecedented. The Khazari gaming champions, martial artists, and sports stars had taken up arms alongside their human trainers. But they weren't fighting like the warriors of old. They fought with all the technique, precision, and creativity they'd learned in Earth's dodos and gaming centers. "You see that formation?" Chen pointed at a display showing young Khazari ships moving in perfect synchronization. "That's from their competitive dance training. And that flanking maneuver? Standard sports tactics." Vikath watched in horror as his forces were systematically dismantled by movements that looked more like a choreographed performance than traditional combat. The younger Khazari had learned something the old guard never could. Style points matter. "This is madness." Vikath roared as another of his ships succumbed to a maneuver that seemed inspired by professional wrestling. "This isn't real combat." "Oh, but it is." Chen's voice came through clear on all channels. "It's just combat that evolved. Like you should have." The battle became the most watched event in human history. Sports commentators provided play-by-play analysis. Gaming streamers broke down the tactics in real time. Someone even added appropriate background music. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings," the main commentator announced, "you're watching history in the making. The old school versus the new school. Traditional warfare versus combat sports. Brought to you by Space Cola. Now with 30% more caffeine for those long space battles." Vikath's forces found themselves not just defeated, but utterly stylized upon. Their rigid traditional tactics were no match for warriors who had learned to think creatively, to adapt, to put on a show while getting the job done. The final blow came from a joint human Khazari team performing what could only be described as synchronized space warfare. They took down Vikath's flagship with a series of maneuvers that scored perfect 10s from the judges. As his ship's systems failed, Vikath received one final transmission from Earth. It was a sponsorship offer for his upcoming War Crimes Tribunal. The battle was over, but humanity's greatest victory wasn't the fighting. It was proving that even the most hardcore warrior race in the galaxy could learn to appreciate the art of combat as entertainment. And the ratings were absolutely killer.